Nostalgia, a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past, typically for a period or place with happy personal associations. That's nostalgia. And as humans, we all feel nostalgia. It's a very powerful mindset and a way to think about things. I always seem to be more nostalgic during the wintertime. I find myself reminiscing on those playful, curious years as a child, those somewhat more mischievous and still very curious years as a teenager, and then into the more depressive and dark years of my 20s, and then even into my early 30s, where I started to get my shit back together and I really started to, kind of realize that life is for real and I gotta take it seriously and I gotta be good to myself and other people around me. All the way up to nowadays, where, I'm so involved in this dark ambient music and just music in general, and I've never been happier in about all my life, and the future seems really bright, but, in spite of all that, I still always reminisce in the past. I find myself listening to like a lot of old video game soundtracks, watching old movies from the 80s, wanting to play old retro video games and stuff like that. All kinds of stuff from like the 90s and 80s. As I get older, I find that it's more important to really keep those things as a part of my life, and I think it's something a lot of people maybe don't do, and maybe why as they grow older they grow unhappy. I don't know, it's hard to say. But regardless of all that, nostalgia is a very amazing thing to have. I think it's something all people should really take time to ponder and really take in. So what does nostalgia have to do with dark ambient music, he asked? Well, in this context, it's centered around an old project that was around for only about a year and a half and made quite a big impact. Nostalgia surfaced from Corona, California back in 2005 as the personal project of Mark Hunter. For about a year and a half, he became quite popular during the MySpace days, and for what it's worth, I remember him being probably one of the most exciting dark ambient experimental creators at the time. And what I recall about that time frame in my life, my listening habits, is I wasn't necessarily listening to that much dark ambient music. I was actually taking a break from a lot of the music I had kind of known and loved for a while. I had taken a break from black metal for about a year, and I was really exploring a lot of other avenues of electronic music at the time, and really wasn't listening to much heavy metal or any form or darker forms of music, really. And the main reason for that is because I had reached a sort of state of such depression at that point that I needed to really just kind of vanquish that out of my soul, and it seemed like a good thing to do. But then when I came across Nostalgia, this project by Mark Hunter, it really brought me back to that dark feeling that I knew I sort of didn't like, but I knew was a part of me, and I had to have part of me in my soul and in my listening habits. And it got me back into dark ambient. I haven't really looked back since then. So as I said, Nostalgia was a project of Mark Hunter. It lasted for about a year and a half, from the last months of 2005 till about the end of 2006. During that period, the project only released 2 demos and 2 EPs, but it made a pretty big impact in the scene. And what I recall is it was something a little bit different, a little more exciting at the time, and maybe it was partially because I had good contact with Mark. We used to talk quite regularly on MySpace and through email, and also my zine Lunar Hypnosis had a discussion board which he often participated. So I got to know him on a pretty good personal level. Plus, we also did an interview for Lunar Hypnosis in those days too. And he sent me as he released each of his albums, he sent them to me for me to review, and I enjoyed every one of them immensely. Unfortunately, the project came to an end. I guess not so much abruptly, or I don't think it was even ever really necessarily announced. The project just sort of faded away as 2006 came to an end. And although a split recording and a full-length album were scheduled to be released, they never surfaced, even to this day. Nostalgia sprang to life in 2005 with a simple demo called Funereal Rituals. And although the layout and the logo and the song titles too are all very reminiscent of black metal, it definitely didn't really have the feel of a black metal project. In fact, this sounded like it was more influenced by Mortis's side project Vond, or what Mark often cited as an influence was the Roz Williams side project Premature Ejaculation. In fact, Mark admitted that before even creating Nostalgia, he had no real knowledge of dark ambient music in any grand scope. He just had heard this music in like black metal projects and other dark atmospheric projects and wanted to create something similar, which is interesting because I've come across other artists who started dark ambient projects not even knowing that Dark Ambient was this whole genre, all these artists and had existed for all these years. And I think that's really interesting when you kind of like, you just create something, being based off, hearing something that you're not even, totally sure what you're doing. It's really cool when you create something it totally fits into this genre that's already existed for years. And that's exactly what Mark did when he first created Funereal Rituals. And although the album suffers from, a sound quality, it was recorded as a 4-track studio and is very, offers very limited, sound source, and the limitations are obviously there. It's still a decent, just a melancholy, dark ambient recording. The album's also covered with various samples from movies, and even one song, To Kill With No Remorse, features various samples of Adolf Hitler. And it's interesting because, stuff like that today would be flagged as being like Nazi propaganda and stuff like that. And, even back then, Mark explained in a booklet that this was only put in there for his interest in World War II and Hitler's rise and fall from power. So it's, it's interesting that he put that in there. That, but we all know that the witch hunters are all after the Nazis, and all these other bad people these days. So it's, one of those things that if this had been released today, 15 years later, it would definitely be flagged as like hate propaganda or something like that, which is ridiculous, but it's the way these people are. So, yeah, that was Funereal Rituals. An interesting, dark, ambient journey, and definitely very melancholy and sad. And, when I first heard this, my thoughts were like, well, nostalgia. What does this guy have nostalgia of? It sounds like he's just feeling like really remorseful and just like this whole life of sadness behind him. But he explained in an interview that wasn't the case at all. It was just the first song that he wrote, Yearning for the End, just made him feel very nostalgic, and it was, although a sad feeling he felt inside, there was still that lingering hope behind this song, and this is just where the name Nostalgia came from, and that's, he decided right then and there that he would call the project Nostalgia. The visual aesthetic of Funereal Rituals is definitely in a black metal vein, and I don't think anything was really done to hide that in these early releases from Nostalgia. I mean, as you can see from the grim black and white cover, the logo, and the font, and the song title himself, it all kind of has that black metal side project feel to it. And even, nods to various black metal musicians in the booklet, all kind of, it's got that black metal feel, no doubt. And in this case, it's not necessarily untrue, because Mark was involved both during, before and after Nostalgia in various black metal bands as a session keyboard player, vocalist, and sometimes other full roles in black metal bands. So he was definitely involved in the black metal scene, no doubt. And there's a front cover, which is Baksinski painting, which, as I understand it, was meant to be much lighter, but the printing press screwed that one up for Mark when they were printing it. And yeah, so that's Funereal Rituals' debut from Nostalgia. Not necessarily the artist's finest moment, but still a decent debut album. June of 2006 was when I heard Nostalgia for the first time, and it was when Mark sent me his Aesthetics of Death demo for review on my zine Lunar Hypnosis. The Aesthetics of Death picked up where Funereal Rituals left it off in that very sad and gloomy, mournful sort of dark ambient vibe. But towards the end of this, it kind of invited more of these industrial and experimental characteristics into the band, which is what would help to characterize the future of Nostalgia. The demo also has a cover of Lycia on it, and it's got a very, I would say, kind of black metal vibe to it, but still really well done. And it also features Malefique from Zasher doing drum programming, and this would also lead to Mark doing session vocals for Zasher when he performed a Lycia cover some years later on one of his own releases. This was my introduction to this project, and I really loved it right from the get-go. It definitely had a very 90s kind of dark ambient vibe to it, very gloomy, very mournful, very sad, but with a slight case of experimentation towards the end. And it had a lot of nods to the old Swedish, Norwegian bands of old, and it really felt special at the time. And although it really kind of this layout and the presentation still had that strong black metal vibe, it was still really good and really made an impression on me at the time. For uncover the Aesthetics of Death, Mark once again used a Baksinski painting, and this one turned out much more brighter and viewable than on the Funereal Rituals demo. And then on the inside, I still remember when I saw that corpse painted picture of Mark, I wouldn't know what to expect. Something like, there was probably some sort of promo letter that came with this, but I remember being a little concerned when I saw the black metal, figure making dark ambient music. I didn't really know what to expect, so to speak, but as I've already explained, I ended up really loving this demo. And then there is the CD, which is like a gloomy, swampy forest picture. Really cool. And that's a CDR, of course, here too. And the back cover, which is another Baksinski painting, which and I really like the song titles too. It's interesting how all the song titles basically form one long poem. Like for example, the first track is "You Are the Disease." Disease, the minds you infect, infection of self-destruction, the process of withering, and so on and so forth. It forms one big, long, grim poem, which is pretty cool, and I don't know that I've necessarily seen that on too many other releases. Really cool kind of approach to the naming of the songs and everything. So, really cool demo, and I sort of consider this more of the real birthplace of nostalgia. This when things started to get a lot more professional. The recording quality was still a little lo-fi, but it was definitely an improvement over the Funereal Rituals. And as I said, this was my where I first heard nostalgia, and it's still an element that really means a lot to me, even though it's not really anything super special in the grand scheme of things. But still, I have nostalgia for this project called Nostalgia, if you can imagine that. And it brings me back to, again, some of that simpler time when I just had time to hang out on MySpace and just, shoot the shit with bands and all that kind of stuff. And it's weird when I think about MySpace because I can't even remember what MySpace pages look like anymore. And I know it probably sounds weird if you were one of those people that was on MySpace a lot, but I literally cannot remember what that site was like because it's been so long since I used that site. And yeah, but I remember, it was mostly good times. There wasn't much fighting on that site as there was like on Facebook and stuff like that nowadays. So it's interesting thinking about that kind of stuff. A few months after the Aesthetics of Death, Mark returned with the Axis I Seasons of Decay split with Cerberus. And this was where nostalgia really started to leave behind those typical black metal side project vibes. The mournful sound was gone, and he went for a much more, I guess I would say, nightmarish sound, which invited in a lot more of minor industrial sounds and sort of vague glimpses at power electronics too. It was a nice, just perfect marriage of ambient and industrial characteristics, not unlike something you might have found on the Cold Mid Industry label during the 90s, although probably not as refined necessarily, but it was a good balance where it wasn't too aggressive and it wasn't too minimal or sleek or anything like that. It was a good marriage of the two, and you could really get into it. And I felt it was really when this, around this point that nostalgia really started to get interesting. And I have to admit, this time I wasn't really into much noisy and experimental music like this. I was, just something about the noise music. I remember, I had a few CDs from, Brighter Death Now at the time. I just could not get into it no matter how I tried. I feel a little bit different about that project now, but at the time I didn't understand noise music and power electronics. And, but it was, nostalgia's, nice bridge between the two really helped me to kind of understand the genre, that particular subgenre a lot more. It was really exciting release for me, and the future seemed really bright for nostalgia after this release. I can also add that the nostalgia tracks also have this vibe that kind of reminds me of the first Silent Hill soundtrack by Akira Yamaoka, which to me is fucking awesome. And I actually asked Mark about it once, and he told me that wasn't the case, and he said he never actually heard of Silent Hill or Akira Yamaoka's music, but it was really interesting. It had a lot of vibes very reminiscent of that first soundtrack, which came on in the late 90s. So again, it was kind of just that interesting how an artist was creating something from not the zero influence. You create this sound that was reminiscent of something that had already been out there for a number of years, and it was really, just totally fascinating to me when that happened, and continues to happen this day when you come across artists that, they just create this music from their heads, and, something they maybe, pull in the influences from movies or something else. They don't even realize that this genre of music is out there, and I think it's just totally fascinating when artists do that. So anyway, that was the Axis I Seasons of Decay split, and really when nostalgia really started to get good, in my opinion. Really, really started to find his own identity. He started to handle the visual representation of the band a lot more himself, and really cool stuff. So here's the front cover, and you also notice that this one has a new nostalgia logo on the front, and the back cover with these logos and track listing of each project. The Cerberus material, I have to admit, is pretty straightforward dark ambient music. Nothing that really stands out about it. I mean, it's decent, just cavernous, bleak dark ambient music, but nothing that's really memorable. And as far as I know, this was the only recording Cerberus ever did. I don't really recall anything else from the project. I don't know. I never heard anything else myself anyway. And there's the front cover and the back of the booklets. And
The inside we have information about each artist, plus thank lists and all that technical information. And Cerberus here. Alright, so that is Exercise, Seasons of Decay, Nostalgia and Cerberus.
Finally, in December of 2006, Mark released the Infestation EP, a 4-tracker which further developed the more power electronics and industrialized ambient sound that was first explored on the XSI Seasons of Decay split with Cerberus. It was here where things really became super mature and the future for Nostalgia seemed really special. Again, those vibes from the Silent Hill soundtrack seem really obvious here, and the cold meat industry vibes of old seem really obvious here. And again, like I said before, this was stuff that Mark, I guess, didn't even know about, but he was just creating this really immense sound. It was really reminiscent of that stuff. It was super cool, and this ended up being the last recording that Mark released, and it's unfortunate because this was really mature stuff, and at the time, it was just interesting seeing how he had blossomed to just really this powerhouse in this scene, and it seemed like he was really going to be something special in this scene, but then he just kind of fizzled out, and I'm not really sure what happened. And I do know that right around the time that this was released, or shortly thereafter, his father passed away, and I can only assume that had a dramatic effect on him, and I don't think he did much music after that, but it's a shame because a full-length album called Eradication Rituals was planned, and a split with a project called The Field of Black Orchids was also planned, and these all remain unreleased to this day. So no one will ever really know what became of Nostalgia or what the future may hold, so it's really unfortunate, but the Infestation's EP is a culmination of everything that he did for that year and a half with the Nostalgia project. It's a hell of an album. It's dark and disturbing stuff, really just nightmarish again, and just really twisted stuff, and the visual layout was super cool, and the layout and the CDR and everything, and it was really around here that Mark took full control of everything and really made it his baby, and that again, it's just a shame that the project didn't continue from here. It really would have been interesting if he would have even just continued for a few more years and put a few more releases to see what he would have done, but unfortunately, he did not. After Nostalgia came to its logical end, Mark took part in a couple different black metal bands. He continued to do guest vocals and keyboard work for Zasher. He also formed a black metal doom hybrid band called Donna S. Requiem, which I never heard, but I know he did I think he did keyboards in that one. He also was a lead vocalist in a black metal band called Spicula Maratus, which was just totally visceral, just dark, occult-themed project, which I really liked a lot at the time. Fortunately, they only made one album and then disappeared. And after what seemed like a long break, he resurfaced in 2017 with a new EP from a new band called Staves, but so far all I've done is that 3-track demo, and that's been it. Other than that, back about 7 or 8 years ago, I surfaced with him where he talked about forming a new project and continuing Nostalgia, but under a different name. There was also a compilation of unreleased Nostalgia tracks were released called Epitaph, which I believe was online on the Nostalgia website, but the website's since been removed. I don't think this can still be downloaded, but I do have it on this channel, and I uploaded it a few months ago, so definitely check it out if you're interested in seeing the culmination of Mark's work. And I have to say, this was really where the Nostalgia hit the point of impact, and it just became this really massive beast, and it's just a shame that again that this project didn't continue on, and I guess no one will know the real reason why Mark can just stop doing music, but it is a shame, and it's a project for me that will always mean a lot, because it was interesting just seeing a project come from the beginning to the end, and a lot of us see that with bands, but it's oftentimes stretched over like a longer 5 to 10, even 15-year period where a band comes to its logical end. So it's just interesting seeing the progression of this project, and of course having somewhat close ties with Mark during that period too was interesting, and reviewing and interviewing him, helping him along the way really made it just a bit more special. So Nostalgia is a project that I'd absolutely recommend. If you're into that more industrialized dark ambient, those later recordings are definitely worth it. Or if you're into that more, I guess, kind of 90s, Swedish, Norwegian, mournful, gloomy, dark ambient sound, definitely consider picking up Funereal Rituals or The Aesthetics of Death. All those records are oftentimes on discography. You can usually get them for like under $10. It's totally worth it. So with that being said, Nostalgia is a project you should definitely check out, and I hope you enjoy these more, episodes that are more focused on one artist. I want to do more of these. This is sort of the pilot of sorts, just to kind of see how this goes over. So I hope you guys like this. Other than that, thank you as always for watching the Inner Sanctum, and remember to check out Nostalgia. Alright, thank you, bye.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you'd like to support me, please consider checking out my Bandcamp site. I have CDs, tapes, and several digital music albums available. I also have a subscription service available. Check it out! Thanks again for spending some of your valuable time with me today, and thank you for supporting Dark Ambient music and this channel.